Hey class, welcome back. Today we are continuing our ancient Rome lesson. Last time we talked about slaves, Roman slaves. Well, this fits under the category of Roman slaves because we were talking about Spartacus and the Third Servile War, and it was a rebellion. The Third Servile War was a rebellion from the slaves. Spartacus was a slave. He was a gladiator, but he was also a slave. It was a war waged by him on Rome, and that's what we are talking about today. And we have lots and lots of skits. I tell the whole story through skits. We're going to have fun. Y'all are going to enjoy the skits, I believe. Without further ado, here we go. My name isn't important now. I'll be known to the world and etched in history forever by another name. The legatists wanted me to attack my own people of Thrace. I refused because that wasn't part of the deal when I joined the Roman auxiliary army. Do you know what we do to deserters? It's usually death. But we have a better idea for you. Take him away. Spartacus was in the auxiliary army, the Roman auxiliary army, and there's not a whole lot of known about him before the Third Servile War and him being a gladiator. But from my understanding, from what I've read, he was in the auxiliary army, and he did not want to attack his own people of Thrace. Thrace is the present-day country of Bulgaria. So he deserted the Roman army, and they caught up to him, sold him into slavery as a gladiator. Early life. Not a lot is known about Spartacus's early life. He was a Thracian who joined the Roman army as a young man. However, things didn't work out. He tried to leave the army because they wanted him to attack his own people of Thrace, present-day Bulgaria. When he was caught leaving, he was sold into slavery as a gladiator. The Romans enslaved me, and Lentulus Gladiatus bought me to use as a gladiator. The conditions are horrible, and I train from sun up to sundown. Tomorrow, I make my debut in the Capua Arena. It's a fight to the death. Spartacus! Back to work. Tomorrow, you prove your worth in the arena and make me money at the same time. Entertain the masses, or I'll send you to the mines like the dog you are. As you can see from our next skit, the life of a gladiator was not very luxurious. It was very tough. He trained at the gladiatorial school under Lentulus Gladiatus. He's the one that bought Spartacus as a slave, and they trained him to fight. That's all they did all day. They trained to fight. And then they put him in the arena to fight animals, other gladiators, and some of these fights were to the death. Life as a gladiator. Spartacus lived the life of a gladiator. He was basically a slave who was forced to fight for the entertainment of the Romans. He was sent to a gladiator school where he constantly trained to fight. Spartacus was trained at the gladiatorial school, or ludus, near Capua, belonging to Lentulus Gladiatus. He was then put into the arena to fight animals or other gladiators. Some of the fights were to the death. He must have been a good fighter and lucky to survive. And you saw Lentulus Gladiatus in the skit just a moment ago. I imagine he would have probably been cocky. He was very cocky, arrogant, and hard on his gladiators in the show Spartacus. I'm sick of risking my life for nothing, just to entertain these people, these Romans, which I've grown to hate. I want to escape. I want to go home to Thrace. I hope my gladiator brothers are with me in this plan.
Your brother Crassus is always with you, Spartacus.
I am with you, Spartacus.
You know I am with you, brother. I am with you, Spartacus. We will have freedom.
Freedom.
We are with you, Spartacus.
Skit 3. You saw him in the arena fighting animals. They also fought other gladiators, but there's several fight scenes in this one, so I wanted to show him fighting an animal in there, and he's fighting a lion. But he got tired of risking his life for the entertainment of others, the Romans. He got tired of the Romans, and he decided, I want to escape. I want to go back home to my home country in Thrace. Life as a gladiator continued. His life as a gladiator was difficult. He became tired of risking his life for the entertainment of others.
He wanted to escape and go home.
We must push down this gate! Quickly! In order to gain our freedom, we mustn't allow anyone to leave this ludus alive and alert the vigilantes of what we've done. To Vesuvius!
You saw them breaking out of the ludus just a moment ago. He got 70 in 73 BC when this happened. He got around 70 gladiators, and they escaped from the gladiatorial school, which was Lentulus Batiatus's ludus. They were able to steal some weapons. They stole armor, and they were able to fight their way free. And when they got done, they fled to Mount Vesuvius because it had high ground, and they were able to see everything from Mount Vesuvius, see what was going on. And along the way, they gathered more slaves, and pretty soon they had a pretty small army.
Escape. In 73 BC, 70 gladiators with Spartacus as their leader escaped from the gladiator school. They were able to steal their weapons and armor and fight their way free. They fled to Mount Vesuvius near the city of Pompeii, gathering more slaves to their small army as they went.
I detest being assigned to capture mere slaves. There is no glory or honor in it. They have the high ground atop Vesuvius. We'll wait them out. There's no food up there. These rebels will eventually starve to death, ending this charade. Gladiator thinks he'll wait at the bottom of the mountain and starve us to death. I am many things, but a fool is not one of them.
The Roman Senate, they got together, and it wasn't really a big deal at first because, you know, they had two slave revolts before this. They'd had the First Servile War and Second Servile War, so it wasn't really a big to-do. So they got a praetor named Claudius Glaber, head an army. Now these men weren't seasoned, hardened soldiers. Okay, they hadn't been at war, but it's still very impressive what Spartacus was able to do even against that, because he just had he had about 70 real soldiers or gladiators. All right. And then the rest of them were just slaves that they had picked up along the way. But they sent about an army of 3,000 men under Claudius Glaber. And Glaber surrounded the mountain. And he figured, okay, well, there's only one path up the mountain, one path down the mountain, and there's no way they can escape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit here and wait at the bottom of the mountain until they just starve to death, because there's not a whole lot to eat on top of Mount Vesuvius. Spartacus had other plans.
Mount Vesuvius. Rome sent an army of 3,000 men under the leadership of Claudius Glaber. Glaber surrounded the slaves at Mount Vesuvius and decided to wait them out. He figured they would eventually starve. Spartacus, however, had a different idea.
They think they have us trapped. We'll make rope with the vines from the surroundings, climb down on the side unguarded, and surprise the Romans. Victory is ours.
They used vines, which was some kind of grapevine or muscadine vine or something that was up on top of the mountain. And they didn't figure they had a way down the mountain, or Glaber didn't. So he said, you know what? They don't have this one side of the mountain protected. We have these vines. I can climb down this side. We can all climb down using these vines. And what they did, they climbed down the mountain, and then they snuck up on the Romans during the middle of the night, and they killed about all 3,000 of them, when some of them run away. But it was pretty close to all 3,000 of them. So then Rome sent another army, around 6,000 soldiers, and Spartacus defeated them too. The fact that they were defeating these armies is still very, very impressive, considering who he was doing it with. You know, he must have known the tactics from being in the Roman auxiliary army that they were going to use, and he used it against them.
Twice defeated. He and the gladiators used vines from local trees to rappel down the side of the mountain and sneak up behind the Roman forces. They killed nearly all 3,000 of the Roman soldiers. Rome sent another army of around 6,000 soldiers. Spartacus and the slaves again defeated them.
You're Spartacus. I came here to join your cause. I want to join your army. All of the slaves in Rome have been whispering your name. My cause is simply to cross the Alps and return to my homelands.
But you're welcome to join us. All right, so with these two victories by Spartacus, people started talking, whispering, especially among slaves. Well, the more success he's having against it, more and more slaves began to come, and as you saw in the last skit, and he soon was up. He'd grown up to like 70,000 slaves. And what they did, these gladiators that he had with them, they used their fighting experience to train the slaves how to fight. And with the two victories they had already, now in total he had 9 victories. I believe it was 9 altogether. They had lots of weapons and lots of armor from defeating these Roman troops.
More slaves joined. As Spartacus continued to have success against the Roman army, more and more slaves began to desert their owners and join up with Spartacus. Soon Spartacus's forces had grown to over 70,000 slaves. The gladiators used their fighting experience to train the slaves how to fight. They also had lots of weapons and armor from defeating the Roman troops.
We'll camp here for the winter, train the new men, and be prepared for the fight ahead.
All right, so they camped during the winter that year, and more and more slaves kept coming to him. And he had about 70,000 slaves camped in Italy, like it says. And they raided Roman towns for food and supplies, and they trained because they knew there were going to be more battles. They were in the middle of Italy at this time. So they knew there were going to be more and more battles from different legions that the Senate were sending after them, trying to capture them. But by this time, the Senate was no longer
surviving the winter. Over the winter of that year, Spartacus and his 70,000 slaves camped in Italy. They raided Roman towns for food and supplies and trained for the battles they knew would come.
These rebels, these runaway slaves, these barbarians must be dealt with soon. Put Lucius Gellius and Cornelius Lentulus in charge of handling this pressing matter.
We will not let you down, Senator. They will feel the might of Rome.
All right, so after the winter, he continued to ambush and defeat Roman units, and they were freeing slaves in the countryside, gathering supplies. Back in Rome, as you've seen from the last skit, the Senate had got impatient with this, and they were getting worried about Spartacus. They weren't worried about him at first, but they were starting to get worried about him. So they sent a large army with two different praetors, Lucius Gellius and Gnaeus Cornelius Lentulus, and each man commanded about 20,000 troops or so.
More battles. Spartacus continued to ambush and defeat Roman units while freeing slaves in the countryside and gathering supplies. Back in Rome, the Senate grew impatient and sent a large army led by the consuls Lucius Gellius and Gnaeus Cornelius Lentulus. Each man may have commanded 10,000 troops.
I said 10,000 there. It's actually about 20,000. So
we must leave this place behind, head towards the Alps, and gain our freedom. This is where you and I did first, Spartacus. The men of Gaul will stay with me. We want to see Rome burn for everything they've done to us. That's one batch of slaves departed from this earth. Now it's Spartacus' turn.
So Spartacus and Crassus, who was also one of the gladiators at the school, they started butting heads and disagreeing on things. Spartacus, his main objective here was to try to get his people to safety. He wanted them to get out of Italy, go back to their homes, spread out. Well, Crassus decided, we've won a few battles here. I'm kind of, I want to get some revenge on Rome. So what they did is, they may have had about 90,000 troops at this time. Well, about 10 or 15,000 stayed with Crassus, and they split the forces. And Crassus went one way, Spartacus went another way. He went to the Alps, and it didn't work out too well because Lucius Gellius caught up with Crassus and wound up killing him and a lot of the rebels.
A split of forces. By spring of 72 BC, Spartacus may have had 90,000 troops, some of which stayed in South Italy with his co-leader, Crassus, while the remainder advanced towards the Alps under the command of Spartacus. This did not work out well for the rebels. The Roman force under Gallius caught up with Crassus, killing the leader along with many of his rebels.
We have the rebel Spartacus trapped. Victory is only moments away. With Gallius closing in behind Spartacus and my army in front, victory is certain. They believe me to be trapped, but my army and I will engage them in battle unexpectedly and seize victory from their grasp. We must continue to the Alps. There are no more remaining obstacles.
As you can see from the skit, they caught up with Spartacus, Gallius, and Lentulus, and they had him hemmed in. But Spartacus turned, and he just rushed them, okay, with his army, and he defeated one army. He defeated Lentulus and captured all of his supplies. Then he turned, and then Gallius was defeated by Spartacus. Gallius turned and tried to get him, and he was defeated by Spartacus and forced to either killed him or he was forced to retreat. But it allowed his troops to march to the Alps, which is what Spartacus wanted to do all along.
Advance on Spartacus. Gallius then proceeded to advance on Spartacus from the south, while Lentulus, who was apparently ahead of Spartacus, drove in from the north. Spartacus was trapped between two armies, likely equipped with better arms and armor than he had. Spartacus suddenly rushed at them and engaged them in battle. He defeated Lentulus and captured all of his army's supplies. Gallius was then either defeated by Spartacus or forced to retreat. Spartacus had not only escaped the trap, but had mauled the Roman army, allowing his troops to march to the Alps.
We only have to cross these mountains in order to gain freedom. If Hannibal could do it, so can we. Spartacus, the sheer size of the Alps, I don't know if we could make it. I vote that we head back through Italy and pillage every town we cross. I say we should take Rome itself. We should head back south. The spoils are too great to pass up. I guess I'm outvoted. I go where my brothers go as your leader.
All right, so they get to the Alps, and this is a big mystery. They don't know exactly why he didn't go ahead and cross the Alps. They think it's because he was probably vetoed by his men. He wanted to go across the Alps, and they saw opportunity. They didn't have all this success beating all these armies, so they probably had the big head. And they wanted to go and plunder the same way Crassus wanted to do. They wanted to go and plunder Rome and continue. You know, they were getting money out of this. They were freeing more slaves, and they probably had the big head about it. They were free to climb the Alps and go to Gaul, but for some reason they didn't. Like I said, it was probably because they were vetoed by his men. Instead, they turned around and started heading back into Italy.
An Alpine mystery. After defeating another Roman force, this one led by a Roman governor named Gaius Cassius Longinus, Spartacus' force was now free to climb the Alps and go to Gaul, Thrace or other areas not controlled by Rome. However, for reasons lost to history, Spartacus chose not to do this, instead turning his force around and heading back into Italy.
We'll march south to the Strait of Messina. There's a whole island of slaves in Sicily waiting to be liberated. It will aid in replenishing our forces.
So the Alpine mystery continued. Like I said, they don't know why exactly he did that. Best explanation was that his own men probably vetoed him. That's what they think. They wanted to see Rome in flames, or perhaps the side of the mountains themselves made them doubt they could cross them. Whatever it was, he led his army back south through Italy. He overcame some more resistance along the way, and he wanted to go to the Strait of Messina and hope they could cross over Sicily and free some more slaves, because it was an island of agriculture and slaves waiting to be liberated. Instead, he was betrayed by pirates. These pirates could have possibly been paid by Marcus Crassus.
An Alpine mystery continued. Why he did this is a mystery. Many theories have been proposed, but the best explanation was already hinted at in ancient sources. Spartacus's own men probably vetoed him. They wanted to see Rome in flames, or perhaps the sight of the mountains themselves made them doubt they could cross them. Whatever the reasons were, Spartacus led his army back south through Italy, overcoming resistance along the way until they arrived at the Strait of Messina. in hopes that they could cross over to Sicily, an island of agriculture and slaves waiting to be liberated.
I am Marcus Crassus, the richest man in the Republic. I'll bend these cowards from Gellius and Lentulus's legions to my will by using decimation. They will never run from an enemy again. They'll fear me more than they do Spartacus. Commence the decimation.
In comes the introduction of Marcus Crassus. Marcus Crassus was the wealthiest man in Rome. He had all kinds of money, and he had made his money several different ways. I'm not even going to get into all that. But he had the money to pay his forces out of pocket. And he took the remnants, what was left of Gellius and Lieutenant Lentulus's armies. He practiced what's called decimation, and that's where the enemies, they would draw lots and see who was going to be killed. This was his own legion he'd do this to. And then they would be beat to death by their own soldiers. A few of them had run away from Spartacus, and he said, "Nah, that's not going to happen anymore. You're going to be more scared of me than you are of Spartacus." And so he practiced, it was an ancient practice that he brought back. It was called decimation.
Marcus Crassus. By the time Spartacus had reached the Straits, a new leader named Marcus Licinius Crassus had taken command of the Roman forces. He was a wealthy individual, able to raise a large army and pay them, at least in part, out of his own pocket. Among his forces were the remnants of legions belonging to Gellius and Lentulus that had been previously defeated by Spartacus. Crassus practiced decimation, where units that ran away from the enemy would draw lots and have a random number of soldiers killed by being clubbed or stoned to death.
Today, Spartacus will meet his end on this very battlefield. I must defeat him before Pompey the Great arrives and steals the victory. I have killed my horse. I'll fight on foot like the rest of you men. If we win, we'll get more horses. If we lose, it doesn't matter anyway. We must defeat Crassus.
So they had some more skirmishes along the way, but in the end, Marcus Crassus, they got down and it came to the final battle, which was somewhere in the upper Salaris Valley. Crassus gathered this large army, about 50,000. By this time, Spartacus' numbers were low. They were in the 30,000 or something. He had lost because he had several battles, and he lost a bunch of men when they were betrayed by the pirates. Strauss says that they can be sure it was fought somewhere, like I said, in the upper Salaris Valley.
Final battle. Crassus gathered a large army of around 50,000 soldiers. At the time, Pompey the Great was returning from another war. The final battle took place in April 71 BC. Strauss says that we cannot be sure where it was fought, but it was likely somewhere in the upper Salaris Valley.
Poor Spartacus. You saw him. It was reported he fought to his last breath in this battle, but it was too much. The Roman army on this day was too much for them to overcome. I've read, and it says 8 to 10. He managed to do 8 to 10 of these centurions before receiving a wound from a spear through the leg, and it's reported he fought to his last breath. I've read anywhere he killed two centurions to he killed 8. So I really like Spartacus. I like the story, so I'm going with 8 because to me he was pretty spectacular. The story itself is pretty spectacular.
Final battle continued. During the battle, Spartacus went straight for Crassus. Crassus had 10 centurions protecting him. Spartacus managed to get through 8 of the 10 before receiving a wound from a spear through the leg. It was reported that he fought to his last breath.
The rebel Spartacus's body cannot be found, but this is my victory, however. I routed the rebel army in the north trying to escape. Word has been dispatched to Rome of my victory.
And as you can see, the two generals, Crassus and Pompey, they defeated the slave revolt. They put down the Third Servile War, and they reportedly killed Spartacus, but the body was never found. They never found the body of Spartacus. It was probably too mangled to identify, and he probably might not have had his armor on at that time. But I like to think, because I really like this story and I like teaching this story, I like to think maybe he didn't die and he finally got to return to his home. That's what he wanted to do from the very get-go. But Pompey wound up taking all of the credit for this. As you'll see, he wound up taking all the credit. They gave him all the credit. And all they gave Crassus was pretty much the one that defeated Spartacus. But they gave Pompey all the credit, and all they gave Crassus was an honorable mention.
Final battle continued. In the end, the two generals, Crassus and Pompey, defeated the slave revolt and reportedly killed Spartacus. His body was never found, however. Maybe he escaped and returned to his home. We will never know.
All right, comprehension questions. What mountains did Spartacus elect not to cross that would have gained the slaves freedom? Was it A, the Cisalpine Mountains, B, Mount Everest, or C, Crowder's Mountain? It is A, the Cisalpine Mountains, the Alps, is where they did not cross. He was vetoed by his men, is what they think.
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner.
Number 2, what job did Spartacus have when he was a slave? We talked about Roman slaves and different jobs they had. Was he a laborer? Was he a gladiator? Or was nothing? He was always free. He was a gladiator as a slave. He grew tired of it. And he said, man, I want to go home. I want to go back home to my home in Thrace. He was a gladiator.
You have a winner.
Number 3, what did Spartacus and 70 gladiators do? A, they were sent to the mines. B, they watched TV. Or C, they escaped from the gladiatorial school, the ludus. They escaped. C, they escaped.
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner.
Number 4, what mountain did they go to right after they escaped? Was it A, Mount Vesuvius, B, Mount Rushmore, or C, the Blue Ridge Mountains? It was A, Mount Vesuvius, and Mount Vesuvius is famous for not only for this, but also in 79 AD for Pompeii. And we'll get to that. We actually have a lesson on that, for it erupting and destroying the whole city of Pompeii.
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner.
Number 5, how did Spartacus escape Mount Vesuvius? A, he jumped off the mountain. B, he climbed down vines on the side of a mountain. Or C, he ran. B, he climbed down vines that they had made. They made ropes out of the vines and climbed down the side of it and came around and attacked the Roman army and won the victory.
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner.
And number 6, who won the final battle? Final battle in this. Was it A, Marcus Crassus, B, Spartacus, or C, Mr. Sean? It was A, Marcus Crassus. Marcus Crassus won, even though they took all the credit away from him. Now, him and Pompey, though, later, along with Julius Caesar, they came together, though, and formed a triumvirate, which we'll talk about when we talk about Julius Caesar.
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner.
All right, that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed all the skits. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. I will see you next time.